I'm 80 years old now, and it makes me sad because I'm getting so excited about the new agriculture
Yeah.
and all the rest. I wish I wish I could be in great health and walking like I did 10 years ago or before COVID and so
Hmm.
on, having the same flexibility to discover all that, all those things and what can happen. To feel that, God, all the varieties are lowering in quality and suddenly in come these coffees from Colombia. And I'm going, oh my God, it's so exciting. Um, it's just keep exploring this amazing world, this gift that was given to us in coffee, this bean that has such miraculous notes that keep surprising us. We're midwives. As
Mm.
roasters, we're midwives, really bringing out the baby
I love it.
and letting it happen. That to me is the role us roasters play.
Mapper Forward is bringing a new perspective to the Japanese coffee industry with Mapper Forward Japan. Every 2 weeks, we're highlighting a selected series from the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, translated and available in Japanese on our YouTube channel. Follow along on our new Instagram account, Mapper Forward Japan, where we'll share industry commentary, episode clips, and market updates all in Japanese. And if you're in the Japanese coffee industry, join our mailing list for updates and exclusive content also in Japanese. All the details are at mapperforward.coffee/Japan, and we'd love you to share this information with your Japanese friends in the coffee industry. Check the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is unfortunately the final episode of this 5-part series, our 2025 edition of the coffee industry according to George Howell. And in this last episode, we are going to have two focuses. One is going to be about coffee varietals and the role that they're going to play in sustainability. And the second half of the conversation is going to be about the coffee industry and how George is seeing the state of the coffee industry. So, George, I must profess, probably the thing that I am least versed in with regards to the coffee industry. And I'm quite ashamed of this because my degree is in genetics. So I should know more about this. But coffee varietals is not something that I have as deep a knowledge about as I should. But they definitely are playing a role in the sustainability and the quality of coffee. So as somebody who is heavily focused on buying coffee, what is your opinion of the coffee varietals as we move into the future? What role will they play?
Right. Well, we are seeing for quite a while now varieties being developed that have certain amounts of Robusta and now maybe the Arabica and other types that have more disease resistance in them. And they have over time gotten better, without a doubt. So that now certain varieties that escape me right now, but certain varieties can be grown that do have disease resistance to things like Roya, rust, and so on. The concern is whether they will continue to have them because they seem to die out, and new rust varieties come out that are able to conquer those plants, and on we go. So again, the case for regenerative agriculture,
Right.
because it begins to wonder that what works today, is it really going to work tomorrow? Two, that these newer varieties, while giving you up to 85, 86 points approximately, they're coffees for the most part.
Right.
They don't have
Everyday
the
drinkers.
floor, so on. So that maybe fills for a while, but we're not sure how long, because then you get the next set, which is like the H1s, and now it's an H10 and all these other types that are grown through leaf culture, right, through seeds at all, and that are clonal. So now you have to go buy them, and this is much more expensive for the farm.
And it's quite Monsanto-like, right? Like,
It doesn't have to be in the sense that I associate Monsanto with, we're going to poison the hell out of everything, but these plants are meant to survive.
But remember what they
That's
did with
not-
soy? Remember what they did with soybeans before they sold to Bayer? For those who don't know, Monsanto created these soybeans where the seed stock did not regenerate. So you could not use the seed stock to create new seed stock. That's what's going to that is what's happening in coffee. They're
these are maybe because it's, again, very expensive.
Yeah.
The starting point.
Yes.
But that way with the clones, you don't have that the next generation, the variations that start to take place as one generation happens after another. It's always the first generation that keeps being repeated over and over again.
Right.
But again, very expensive to set up and so on. So that right off the bat, like H1s, I'm paying a real premium for that. Yeah, much higher price. So you have to ask yourself, is that the direction, right? I'd rather put the seed in and develop it that way. It's much easier for a farmer too. And then what we're seeing is, and then you have the other end. For me, it's the battle that I feel I'm personally involved with in Kenya, which is the SL28, right, and to some degree the SL34, but the 28 particular, which was developed sometime I believe in the 1930s, and it is the only case I know of a plant being developed for better production by becoming drought resistant specifically.
Right.
That actually improved the quality.
Right.
That made an amazing quality coffee with flavor that is as unique as Gesha is for people who want the floral, just the absolute equal to it. That goes at a fraction of the price.
Right.
But
is it high yield?
The yield is quite good.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. Not great, but good yield.
Okay.
Right? And steady. And this plant also has drought resistance because its roots go far deeper.
Okay.
Than do other plants. A lot of the newer generation type that are being built, like Ruiru 11 and Batian, that are being currently, climate change and so on, have terrible root systems. And so they're grafting them onto SL28 roots in order to have them grow. Then there are a whole host of other problems with those varieties, right? Including that they don't have the flavor for which Kenya became famous. Led the world in of price that it received for coffee back in the 1980s and 90s. I mean, their auction system and so on. But they moved towards these newer varieties because they were more resistant to diseases. And little by little, they have taken over and now become prevalent in most co-ops and farms.
Right.
To where they've gone to 50% or more.
Wow.
And with it has caused the disappearance of what Europeans call blackcurrant and what we in the States call blackberry. This very, very sweet, soft fruit note that is mouth coating in a way that I know of no other coffee having. And yet it's being demolished. And I remember when I had Coffee Connection the last several years, we were doing a competition for the best coffees and this was with Dorman's, right? And it was called the Coffee Connection Prize at that time, and we were going to the co-ops awarding. So this would be like I would buy 12 different lots of Kenya, the very best ones that I had paid, more than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did a competition, and the first prize would get, I think at the time, $10,000 or something like that. 1/3 of which went to the managers of the processing mill,
Wow.
right? Because they're the ones responsible for doing it right, not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the other went to infrastructure. And this is thanks to Jeremy Block, I have to say. This was his concept, his idea, and I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, wow.
And but when we went to the farm, to the co-ops that won, I preached, as did he, watch out with Ruiru 11, which was starting to be introduced and pushed by the authorities, right, in Kenya, who may have known about that, but didn't know about the drink itself because they drink tea in Kenya.
Right.
Right. And saying, don't plant Ruiru 11 because the price you're going to get paid as a farmer is going to go down. So you're not winning.
Right.
Because it's going to taste like everybody else.
Right.
The very special
You lose the Kenya in Kenya.
So this is a real, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because here I'm trying to preserve a plant that requires, for the moment, spraying in order to prevent the rust.
Right.
Right? Or in their particular case, CBD, coffee berry disease, which is the more scary one, not rust, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But this coffee, this variety has to be preserved because it's utterly amazing. I've not seen it grow successfully in any other country. It is the soil. It really is the essence of terroir. So that's the variety. We're also starting to see now out of nowhere, pink Bourbon and these other varieties come out of Colombia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who would have guessed, right? I had sort of, we got to keep selling the Colombians and their Variedad de Colombia and the Castillo, the more recent variety, and so on, which is, again, pretty good coffee. It does have certain notes that are really kind of, that I like, but has an aftertaste that I don't like necessarily, where it's kind of greenish.
Right.
But yeah, it's good, and I like to sell it. Suddenly out comes pink Bourbon, and I'm blowing my mind.
Have you managed to find enough of it yet? Because the last time you came on the podcast, you were like, we can't find enough. We can't find enough pink Bourbon. Have you managed to get enough supply?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, but getting the coffee here is the problem.
From Colombia.
Right. With the Mamuto that I get in Kenya, flying all of the whole thing.
Well, the tariffs are about to become a problem.
If I'm going to pay $8 a pound, or $7, I'm going to fly the coffee.
Yeah.
And people may say, well, you're using up all that gasoline fuel and all the rest of it and so on. But I'm selling quality. I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because the coffee is arriving so many months after the fact that it's been picked that it's dead on arrival.
Yeah.
Or dying.
Yeah.
And it's a fraction of what the miracle that it was. Right? So
I can't have...
That's another issue.
Well, I want to talk about that issue because I can't have a conversation with you about this and you talking about flying the coffees into the US without asking you about how you feel about the impact that tariffs on coffee are going to have on the industry and your business. And I guess now we're moving into the conversation about the state of the industry. But you as a US-based company, how do you see this moment? with regards to tariffs? Because they're about to kick in.
Well, yeah, I've actually just read something that apparently the administration is considering eliminating tariffs for coffee. That's not a done deal or
No,
anything,
it's
but
not.
there is talk right now that I just got yesterday
Do you remember
that
the
that is
source
more.
of that?
Sorry,
Do you remember the source of that?
I can check it.
No problem.
I'd have to start
I
looking
just thought if you knew off the top
through
of your
my
mind,
ether.
because I've been speaking to lawyers about it, and that I got
Yeah,
something completely different, but that's okay. How do
it's
you
a
feel
mixed.
about it?
You need to know, especially with the Trump administration, which
Right.
says one thing today and another thing tomorrow, and
Yep.
changes it line a third time.
Yep.
Right. So who knows?
100%.
Right. I don't count on it, but yeah, it's insane. I mean, coffee's not grown in the United States
Not much of it
at
anyway.
all. It can't be in the United States. I mean, Kona's a joke, and a little bit of Puerto Rico, and that's it. So it shouldn't be tariffed to
No.
begin with on any. It doesn't. It hurts the farmers. It hurts coffee roasters in the U.S.
And consumers. Yeah. Do you think
Right,
that your
because they're
consumers
looking at a cost. Well,
Well-
that's huge. A huge increase. So survival is a matter. And on top of that, they're throwing a 10% tariff on top of that, right? It's absurd.
or more? Well, so Vietnam is
or more.
looking for countries like
Yeah,
Vietnam,
20%.
20%. You know,
Right.
this is,
Yeah.
I mean, how do we
I
go
know.
with this coffee price crisis?
And if coffee, what is it? If the coffee goes, no, that was already earlier. It's like, okay, the coffee arrives before April 5th, I think it was. It had to arrive before April 5th, and then
It had to
was
leave. Yes, it had
not-
to leave the country. But he paused all the
Right.
tariffs, and now they're coming back into play again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to start to see some significant shifts here. Do you think it's going to have an impact on the industry at large in the US?
As long as it's 10%,
A business
I don't know. I think it's going to depend on a whole lot of other things. I still think we're going to see a lot more inflation
Yeah.
as these things start to affect more than just coffee. Coffee's been triply impacted because of the crisis in Brazil and consumption versus production and all the rest of it. So we're particularly affected, but you're going to see automobiles go up in
Totally.
price. You're going to see construction go up. I mean, the cost of living, I'll be amazed if it doesn't go up as we go into this year, further into this year, and these tariffs start to take hold, right?
I mean, and 10% isn't
So
something.
all of this is going to affect how it affects coffee as
Right.
well.
Right.
If coffee is by itself, that's one thing. If it's a whole lot of other things and people are really scratching to make a living, that's another,
Right.
right? So
So
I'm sure if everything goes well in the economy, we can live with the tariffs, although it's unfair and shouldn't be put. And it reduces the opportunities farmers have to do
Right.
better.
we say this hours, or no, like 24 hours after the big, beautiful bill was passed. So I'm not sure.
God.
I mean, there
I
have
know.
been some things that have been embarrassing for America. This has to be right at the
Yes.
top of it.
It certainly is. It certainly is. But when Trump goes to Europe and is called the daddy by some other European leader, that's an embarrassment too.
Well, there's a
mean,
there's a
the
lot
whole
of
thing-
moments. It's quite the circus. Speaking of circuses, what are you thinking about the coffee industry right now?
That we're in tumultuous change, just crazy change. You know, I know you've been talking about and thinking about SCA and SCA, FCA, and such groups. I've always gone to SCA because it's a chance to run into all kinds of people that I haven't had a chance to run into before, talk to them, learn from them, exchange, and all the rest of it. I have never taken very seriously the courses that they give. Uh, perhaps, perhaps, perhaps I should look into that further again, but many of them in the past were the blind teaching the blind.
Yeah, I agree.
Courses to how to successfully grow cafe by franchisees being taught teaching, et cetera, and having one class which I taught, which was the difference between washed and demucilaged coffee, right? Very similar product, but and having them. So I found myself suddenly running one table, even though this was my education thing. There were like 10 or more tables with about 6 or 7 cuppers at each table, and I was running one of them, and I was asked, well, how do you tell the difference? And I wouldn't answer. I wouldn't tell them this is that's the other. I would say, look for main changes like in acidity, and think of a strawberry or a raspberry versus a banana. One is acidic, one is much less so. Think about that, tasting the coffee, and you tell me.
Right.
And they were able to pick out the coffees correctly. But at other tables, they were being told, oh, this is more acidic and that's less acidic. And people were choosing it that way and half the time being incorrect.
Right.
Right. And just, anyway, it's a lot of things that are floating that are not really really questioned as fully as they should have been. So
what do you think about the politics
again,
that's going on right now?
Well, there's the whole cupping thing that's going on right now, which is not useful to my mind at all. I mean, I think many of the more important roasters are having their own cupping forms at this point.
Yep.
You're into quality. You are not just checking out what the flavor is. You're checking out the density of the bean. You're checking out how many defects there are. You're checking the different, what are the sizes of the beans? Are they tiny all the way to large? Are they more mixed? A double A is one size, AB is another size, right? That affects the roasting. You're looking at all these things from your point of view on how you're going to deal with it, how much moisture that they have, right? And water activity, another one. So we're measuring all those things. I don't need these new forms to really look at it. I go visit the farms and talk to the farmers and so on. If I haven't gone there and I'm selling their coffee, I squeeze out every last piece of information I can from the person I bought it from. So, and I don't see how I use that form in a competition or something like that. There's no time. I mean, it's insanely complex. Right. So to my mind, it's a lot of talk, but I'm not terribly interested in it.
It seems to be, and the thing that I kept saying this whole year since Houston is that it has hijacked the conversation it sucked the air out of the room of the conversations that we should be having. In your mind, what are the conversations that we should be having?
Yeah, right. Well, agriculture is growing. And also the different groups that represent interests for improving the livelihoods of coffee farmers.
Mm.
There was a time where fair trade was accusing direct trade of God knows what, and so on. No, people in fair trade and direct trade and organic and all these different groups should be coming together and discussing together where to go.
Mm.
That to me should be the function of SCA, really, is gathering these groups and trying to find consensus, so that we can build faster where we need to go,
Right.
in a more coordinated fashion, right, as opposed to different groups. And I think in the case of CQI and all of that, the air got sucked out of the room by that sudden change that was dramatic, and that affected an awful lot of people who were committed to the CQI one way, and now we're suddenly seeing the rules change, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's unfortunate,
Right.
to my mind.
Right.
The emphasis does have to be placed on regenerative agriculture. How do we fix these things?
Right.
That's essential. But also continue cupping and informing ourselves as to, how things taste and so on. That's a major piece.
Right. One of the things that I wonder if we're not talking enough about is the small business and the viability of the small business model in coffee for a brand new startup. I feel like that's a conversation that it's a shame that we're not having that conversation, because there are so many businesses going out of business right now.
Oh yeah. And we see companies coming into the specialty realm that are highly leveraged with capital,
Yep.
venture capital, and so on, that are coming in selling at way lower prices.
Yep.
Not because they're making any money, but because they want to be everywhere.
Yep. We're talking about the Luckens, the Blank Streets, the all of those guys.
You're exactly right, and they do no one any favors
At all.
And they can create a desert of coffee culture.
Yep.
Right. That is produced by the different cafes that exist now, each with their own perspective that they want to communicate to their customers.
Well, and they call themselves a tech company. Like Blank Street calls itself a tech company. And this is the danger that happens. I mean, so is Lucken. The danger that we find when these guys come in and carpet bomb, as they say, different areas and different cities, is they homogenize the cafe landscape and they dumb down the experience of getting a coffee. And that...
Yep.
Why the fuck are we not having this conversation in the industry? Why is that not the conversation that's being had at SCA Expo and at World of Coffees? That's the part that blows my mind.
Well, because we included that from the start. We've included such companies from the start.
Right.
In specialty coffee.
Right.
It's like specialty coffee no longer means quality. It hasn't for a long time.
Right.
It just means what separates itself from the bulk down below that has no particular distinction of any kind whatsoever. So that could be price can make it specialty.
Right.
Or
furniture.
Or perfuming that
right.
high hell. And that's different. So that's specialty. But it's not quality necessarily at all.
No.
Right. So yeah, maybe there needs to be a group within SCA or a separate group that is smaller and more concentrated.
Right.
That excludes the really large companies that have gone for volume. And it's changed them too. I think of Starbucks, that wanted to be the everybody's living room.
Yeah, the third place, right?
I think the case anymore, right? You drive a car up and then you fight in line to get a drink with all the teeny boppers in front drinking flavored drinks.
I I
Right?
I wish I had a whole other series to talk to you about those kinds of drinks, given that you were the one who started the Frappuccino and where that has
Oh,
evolved to. Like it's nowhere near
and,
the genesis of the Frappuccino. But now, like
and I did not invent it. Please, I did not invent
you
it.
did not.
Um, I,
You
I did not. That was around for a long time before me. We invented the name.
the name. The
It was
name
a marketing
Frappuccino.
person
Right.
who
Uh,
invented it.
right.
That's the only thing that came of it.
Right. And and
And it made summertime sales much higher, so it was great for our
right.
continued survival, thriving for me to spend the money I wanted to spend on great things.
Right. But
But it
that's what
has its down.
that's what business is headed towards, a revolving door of those kinds of things now, because of
Yeah,
the social
yeah,
media culture, because of the role that marketers play in our industry now. Everything's
yeah,
fad after fad after fad. They've taken matcha, and it's no longer just about matcha. It went from matcha to the iced matcha
yeah.
to the cloud matcha, and who knows what's going to come
Yeah,
next.
I
So
know.
this is where we're at. Now, as we wrap up this series, George, I cannot tell you how much of a highlight it is for me every year to have this conversation. I cannot thank you enough. I'm going to ask you the last question that we now ask every guest that comes on the
Yeah.
podcast. So, when the future version of you comes back and watches this, what do you hope for him?
Well, I can answer that only simply by saying, I'm 80 years old now, and it makes me sad because I'm getting so excited about the new agriculture
Yeah.
and all the rest. I wish I I wish I could be in great health and walking like I did 10 years ago or before COVID and so
Hmm.
on, having the same flexibility to discover all that, all those things and what can happen. To feel that, God, all the varieties are lowering in quality and suddenly in come these coffees from Colombia. And I'm going, oh my God, it's so exciting. Um, it's just keep exploring this amazing world, this gift that was given to us in coffee, this being that has such miraculous notes that keep surprising us. We're midwives. As
Hmm.
roasters, we're midwives, really bringing out the baby
I love it.
and letting it happen. That to me is the role us roasters play, right? Or we're the conductors, the pianists, the violinists playing the score that was given to us by
By
by the
nature.
plant itself, by
I
nature.
hope that I get to have a coffee with him in person. I I I'm
So
looking. I hope that that I get to spend some time with him over a coffee, talking about what he discovered that you haven't yet. So I look forward to that, George.
it's all about sharing. I mean, that's the danger of where we're going with the internet and
Right,
everything else is the lack of sharing,
right,
right?
right.
Coffee finest is about sharing.
And and on that note, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with us. Will you tell people where they can find out more about what you guys are doing at George Howell Coffee?
Well, website,
Perfect.
you know, and trying to develop that so we can speak more than we have.
Mhm.
I'm struggling with that now. Video versus photographs
Right.
versus how do you tell a story and so on. And that's just beginning.
Mhm.
And it's being frustrating. But in any case, our website is georgehowellcoffee.com.
Right.
Um, And, I hope to be writing a book. People have been hearing that from me for years, but I am slowly backing out of the everyday work with the cafe, with the business itself, with Jennifer and my COO, Rebecca, who are taking over.
Oh, bless your heart, George. I am honored that we get to have these conversations and to document your perspectives on the industry. I look forward to many more years of that. I look forward to reading this book, and I would just encourage people to take a look at what George has created over the past 50 years and aspire to the artistry of creating businesses and roasting coffee and relationships and pride that you're somebody who I deeply, deeply look up to. And, my life changed in coffee, George, after I started seeing what you were doing.
Thank you. Oh, I want to add one last
Please.
thing. Definitely. To me, that's critical because we are roasters.
Yes.
That's what I do, is roast. SCA should be much more into trying to understand and pushing the industry to develop better roasters. I really have loved roasting. I am happy with some of the coffees we come out with. Then the weather changes or something. We are in kindergarten when it comes to roasting, light roast correctly.
Yeah.
And bringing everything up. Every time we do it, it's a risk. The humidity changed, this changed. It was better last week than it is this week. There is a ton to do right there. And the sharing then of, like, I can't afford to go out and buy this other roaster that so-and-so is talking about and saying it's great. It might be, but how do I learn about it? How do I test it out? How about a place where you can go and check out all the models or many of them, one versus the other? Because as purveyors, we need to be given that tool. We need to be able to find that tool that best expresses what we think coffee should be.
Whoever's out there listening, you've heard it here. This is the man every one of us should be paying attention to. George, thank you again. Would you do us the honor of signing off this yet again another series with our peace, love, and peanut butter?
All right, there we go. Whoops.
Peace, love, and peanut butter.
To you too.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.